Sounds like a lot of...
Hoopla!
Sounds like a lot of...
Hoopla!
Sounds like a...
Hoopla!
Hey there everybody, welcome to a very special episode of Aussie Hoopla. You're listening to the voice of Aussie Hoopla, Dan Boyce. To all the people who subscribe to the Aussie Hoopla podcast on iTunes, we appreciate it. Obviously you're going to be the first to hear the results of our first live podcast, so it's really exciting. Of course, this stems from the last episode of the Hyping the Hoopla podcast, where I challenged Matt Smith, former Cairns Taipans player, who believed that the 1992 Dream Team would destroy, would annihilate, would demolish the 2012 Team USA team. I didn't agree with him. I thought that not only Team USA could defeat the 1992 Dream Team, but I felt that the online basketball community of Australia would think the same as I did. What resulted is the following podcast. Now, I must first apologise to a number of people who tried to get through and join the podcast that couldn't. I know guys like David Petroziello, Paul from Hoop Diary, Reese Carter, who couldn't connect from Crete, Glenn Barlow, Tom Reed, all tried to take part in the podcast, but were unable to connect. And I'm sure there's a couple of names I've forgotten, but my apologies to you guys. Hopefully things run a bit smoother the next time we attempt one of these endeavours. The show was obviously hosted by myself, and I was joined by my Hyping the Hoopla co-host, Matt Smith. Lucky for us, we're able to get inside the minds of two very prominent members of the Australian basketball community. One being Mark Goodwin, a guard for the Waverley Falcons, back-to-back champions in the Big V, the State League in Victoria. And Jamie O'Loughlin, an assistant coach with the Under-17 boys team, which recently won a silver medal in Lithuania. And then I hope you enjoy listening to the result of our first ever live Aussie basketball podcast. If you like what you hear, hit us up on Twitter, on Facebook. Let us know. Obviously, the more people that enjoy what they hear, more likely we'll be able to do some more of these. So sit back and enjoy the show.
1992 Dream Team featuring Jordan, Bird, and Magic against the 2012 Olympic team with Kobe, Lebron, and Durrant. Kobe Bryant said he thinks this team could beat the Dream Team.
Well, we could. You know, it would be a tough matchup to say the least. I mean, you're dealing with all-time greats. I mean, the thing that we have at our advantage is that most of the guys that we have on this team are in their prime, and myself, I'll be going on 17 years in the league, but I'm still 33 years of age.
Well, I'm a little bit biased. Because I'm a part of this team, but I definitely like our chances.
You know, they said that was the best team ever assembled, so we love to challenge them.
Players on the 2012 team said they think they'd have a little bit of an edge.
Maybe our speed, we got a lot of quick guys, but it'll be a good one.
We're deep. We got a lot of scoring. We got a lot of defenders, and I love to see that game.
As for matchups,
I'd obviously take MJ, and Brian, I actually take Magic, and, we just fall on down the line from there.
I guess I'm going to be on Stockton, huh? We'll probably try to get some shorts on him that actually fits.
I guess it all started last week, Matt, when you and I were hosting the episode of Hyping the Hoopla, and you were pretty adamant about the 1992 team not even having any competition out of this year's Team USA team. Is that still your way of thinking after everything that's gone on this week?
Yeah, look, and I've taken a bit more time to think about it, and I still maintain that Charles Barkley was right. The only players from the 212 who can even make the Dream Team is Durrant, Kobe, and LeBron.
How old is Kobe Bryant? Isn't he 36?
I don't think he's that old. Maybe 34. Somewhere in there. Yeah, I think so.
Somewhere. And he's calling us old? But that just made me laugh. I said, Kobe Bryant's 34, 35. And Michael Jordan and me the same age, because he's 2 days older than me, so we're both 29. And I listen, other than Kobe, LeBron, and Kevin Durant, I don't think anybody else on that team makes our team.
Now, a lot of people are going to go to LeBron's a beast, LeBron's a beast. LeBron is a beast, but LeBron is only one player. So, 1 through 12, I'm taking the first Dream Team every time.
What about to start off with? My first point that I'm going to argue with is about the evolution of the international game. The international competition that this year's Dream Team will face is a totally different type of competition that they had to face in 1992. Not to mention the fact that you've also got the added onus on this year's team that is, the team that went over in 92 was basically going just, it was a cakewalk for them. The teams now, they've lost in 2008, they lost in 2006. There's actually, the competitive juices are flowing, and it's going to be a lot different for this team coming into today.
But you're missing the simple fact that the reason the Dream Team came into it is because world basketball had caught up. In 1988 at the Seoul Olympics, the American team finished third. They actually beat Australia for that medal, which was our best finish and their worst ever finish. So the whole reason the Dream Team even came into existence is because international basketball had already stepped up to the plate and was ready to make that challenge. And then the greatest team ever assembled arrived and slapped everybody down.
Well, so you don't think that the fact? I mean, obviously the Dream Team, they went through and basically did a number on the opposition. You don't think that the fact that that this year's international competition's changed so much that this year's team wouldn't be a better team in the fact that they're facing tougher competition? Like, I don't think anyone's disagreeing that this year's Boomers team would have beaten the Boomers team then, or this year's Croatia team or this year's Spanish team would have beaten the Spanish teams then. In saying that, isn't it just common sense that the USA team would be better than the USA team of 1992?
There's still a few players missing, though, on this year's USA team. Like, there's a few players that can't play, injuries or chosen not to or whatever else. So it's not really this year's best USA team that they could put together.
Yeah, but you run that hypothetical and you switch out Christian Laettner for Shaquille O'Neal. And all of a sudden the first Dream Team gets scary again, so you can really only judge who's going to be on the court.
Yeah.
But if you look at them sort of 1 through 5, and this has been my thinking for the last week, you look at the 5 spot. Who's this mob running in the 5? It's Chandler. What's his name? Chandler, Tyson Chandler, and Anthony Davis.
That's right.
Versus Patrick Ewing and David Robinson.
Yeah.
Okay, that's going to go badly. Who's in the 4 spot?
No. Let's stay on the big man for a second.
The thing about that is, though, there's no big man in the league anymore. The guys in 92. But is that just because there's no good big guys anymore, or just because you don't need them to play the game as much anymore? Like, it's developed so much that big guys aren't that important anymore. You just need speed and athleticism.
Well, I'll throw that one to Jamie. He's the coach.
It's I like the idea about the centres having a big say, because I think that's where the game could be probably won or lost, and that the 92 team with the 2 bigs, Robertson and Ewing, just looks too imposing.
Well, I mean, it's my thoughts is the opposite. My thoughts is that the game's changed. You have a look at the teams that have been a part of the NBA Finals across the past few years, and size isn't a part of the game of basketball anymore. The big man has become obsolete because the game's just become too fast and too athletic. I mean, nearly every team now has power forwards and centers that can knock down the long ball, which makes the presence of traditional centers a liability on the defensive end. Sure, you've got, Ewing and Robinson, patrolling the paint. But what happens when Kevin Durrant steps out to, Kevin Durant starting at the 4 there? What happens when he steps out to the 3-point line? Or what happens when Kevin Love, their other power forward, steps out to the 3-point line?
Well,
is there
nothing to the centers because they're not guarding power forwards?
I wonder what happens when Kevin Durant tries to guard Karl Malone.
Ooh, that gets ugly real fast, doesn't it? Ooh, Jesus. Coming off a pick with John Stockton, who very, very silly men stand in the way of Karl Malone at full speed. Ask your boy Hammer, he did it.
But yeah, so yeah, it's my opinion that the original Dream Team's main advantage of big players is actually a disadvantage. I mean, there's plenty of big teams in the NBA, and you see them. Why has if what you're arguing is right? I mean, you've got a very good point to say that Karl Malone, they're going to have their hands full of Karl Malone. I totally agree in a one-on-one matchup that they would. But when we're talking about the game of basketball and 5 guys playing 5 guys, I think that speed and athleticism just wins out. And you look at the NBA, and so many teams are going small ball, but you'd rarely see many teams that are stacking up on bigs.
I think that's true when you're dealing with traditional plotting centres. But you got to remember, Patrick Ewing and David Robinson aren't traditional plotting centres. It's one thing to have something like, you know, for lack of a better example, me out there. I can't stay in front of anybody. But Ewing and Robinson, I mean, Robinson was a supreme athlete. He'd be able to stay in front of you for a couple of slides. You know, it was really all you need to do before the help will rotate. And Patrick Ewing had all those jump shots and cute things. It's just he was better off in the paint, and he understood that. There's been a move away, I guess, from the traditional bigs in a lot of basketball, and it's a bit sad to see. And I think there's reasons for that, and we've discussed it earlier. But you get a legitimate big man in the post, and people can't do anything about it. That's why Shaq was so good for so long.
Yeah, it's all injuries take their toll, but it's also interesting to see the last couple of years that Shaquille was around. He really didn't have that much impact in the game.
He was in his late 30s and weighed over 300 pounds.
True. And it's tough for me to take the opposite side to Shaquille O'Neal, that's for sure.
I was just about to say, it doesn't sound like you to be saying Shaquille's not the best.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of shooting my own foot off, aren't I? Well, what about, Jamie, you come from a very interesting perspective at the moment. You've just come back from the Under-17 World Championships where, here I am talking about how the game's developed and the game's changed and there's no legitimate big men anymore. They're all looking to go fast and athletic. Well, in theory, the game has changed because the players that were playing, 10 years ago have entered the league. So the guys that you're coaching with and against, that's the guys that we'll be talking about in the future that, continue the game's evolution. Is there much of a role of a big man in junior basketball in an international sense at the moment?
Oh, look, absolutely. And you don't have to look any further than who was the MVP of the World Championships. It was Gio Okafor. So 6'10", 120 kid, 120 kilo kid that just was completely unstoppable. And he was the MVP of the whole thing. So look, there is a role for that big man, but I guess finding those quality big guys can be hard to do at times, and I guess there's a lack of them in US basketball right now, but and they'll make do with that mobile forward. But it's interesting how watching the last few games on ESPN where the US are having a lead-up games, the way they play was very, very much the way the 17 played and used their athleticism to trap and to really get after you with the defense, and that seemed to be the thing that actually set them apart more than anything else.
Yeah,
I think that's fine when you're dealing with guys who aren't as athletic and aren't used to that sort of thing. But you've got Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Scottie Pippen, John Stockton bringing the ball up the floor, and I think your athleticism is going to be negated by smarts and the athleticism of the guys you're playing against as well. So it's kind of a moot point in that respect. I think the athleticism, I think you particularly you, Daniel, you think you give too much credence to athleticism when smarts will get you through in the end.
I think one of the things when I was looking myself at trying to work out who I thought might win if they were to play, obviously the centres was a big area, or the power game was a big area, but that point you're making, in regard to the intelligence, that it just looks like it was a much smarter team, and whereas this team does rely on its athletic ability, and it's very good play off the dribble, which is sort of the way the game sort of seems to be going, where you've just got to be really good off the dribble to be successful in the NBA these days.
Well, there's an opposite side to that coin, and my opinion is that it's very easy, and I'm sure that all of us have been involved in basketball teams or either playing or coaching or whatever it might be, where you have gone through a tournament or, a competition and won fairly easily. And it's very easily to get on with people that you don't like or people that you might, have problems with when you're winning by 30, 40, 50 points like the Dream Team did. I think in a game where these two teams were pitted against each other, I think everyone's pretty much of the consensus that it would be a very close game. So when you got to dig your heels in, and it is a game where players are going to have to give every cent against, that's when players start to turn on people, and a real leader needs to be there when that happens. I don't think that there was a real leader in the original Dream Team. I think there was a lot of egos. If anyone saw the Dream Team documentary, it was pretty evident that there was little groups, little segregated groups that formed during the tour. Whereas it's quite clear that, the rivalries that are in basketball right now in the NBA aren't what they used to be. There's no, decapitating Kurt Rambis when he comes to the basket by the Celtics anymore, Kevin Durant and LeBron James train together in the summers. Chris Paul and LeBron share agents and they're close friends. Carmelo and LeBron are childhood buddies. Kobe is Westbrook's hero. Kevin Love just loves everybody. And everyone loves Blake Griffin. The connections go on and on and on. I think that when the chips come down to it and you're in a really dog-eat-dog clash, I think the chemistry that the 2012 team far outweighs the chemistry of the 92 team.
I've been on teams that like each other and had their asses kicked, though.
Sorry, what was that, Matt?
I've
Sorry?
been on plenty of teams that have liked each other and just had their asses kicked. Look, at the end of the day, you'd like to think that between the on-court intelligence of Magic and Bird and just the willpower of Jordan, you're getting over the line.
Magic's one of the best leaders there's ever been, though. Like, he's proved that not only throughout his career, but also after his career in, his business world now. He's one of the best leaders there is.
Yeah,
I agree with
exactly.
I agree with that, and that's my point. Do you think that Michael Jordan would have been listening to Magic Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes down to it, you see that there's the 92 team that had just such, Mark sort of commented about the fact that they had a lot of leaders. The fact of the matter is that that I don't think that any of those guys would have taken a backward step. I don't think Jordan would have taken a backward step. I don't think he would have been listening to Magic Johnson, who's a great leader, or Larry Bird. I think he was using the Dream Team as an opportunity to prove to everyone that he could, he was the alpha dog. He was the main event in basketball at that stage. Whereas I think on this team, it's quite clear that Kobe's kind of, even though he might not be the best player, he's pretty much the alpha dog in this scenario. And I think that the rest of the team would sort of follow his lead in a tight game where there does have to be, sort of a captain of a ship. One thing that's, interesting to listen about is Jordan's comments on how they how the team learned from then. I've got these comments here. You can take a listen.
Kobe thinks that this version would beat the 92 Dream Team.
So he said yesterday.
Here's what Michael Jordan had to say about that. Told the Associated Press, I absolutely laughed when hearing Bryant's comments. I imagine he's trying to say it to legitimize his own Dream Team, Jordan said, but to me, it's not even a question what team is better. I'd like to think that we had 11 Hall of Famers on that team, and whenever they get 11 Hall of Famers, you call and ask me who had the better Dream Team. Remember now, they learned from us. We didn't learn from them.
He's right. 11 Hall of Famers.
Well, there's arguably 12 if you consider that the Dream Team's gone into the Naismith Hall of Fame as a team. So Christian Laettner is there.
Christian Laettner got the gig. I mean, but you look at the 2012 Dream Team. Kobe's a lock. LeBron's a lock.
One person
will probably get there. James Harden, maybe not. Chris Paul. Yeah.
It's not really about that, though. I mean, obviously they have a lot better players, but at what stage in their career,
Jordan and Barkley were 29. They were at the prime of their careers.
They were, but it's. I mean, if you have a look at the, I don't know if you guys can see, but you can't, Matt. I know that, but
the average.
Now I'm blind now. I see how it is.
The average age of the two teams, the 92 team is 28.8 years old, and this year's team's 26.2. They've all played an average of 7 NBA seasons, and the 92 team has 12 NBA titles, while the 2012 team has 7. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Matt. Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley were both younger than Kobe, but we're looking at a team where, the Dream Team, they had Larry, who was well past it. Magic was in the twilight of his career.
He just had a year off, Magic.
He just had a year out of the game. Whereas Kobe Bryant, even though he might be a little bit older than them, he's still sort of, he's the elder statesman of this team. They're far, obviously from the average age, they're 2 years older, so they are an older team. No matter how old Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley were. And I think whether you argue that it's the experience that they have that gets them over, or the youth of the 2012 team that wins it, you can't deny the fact that they are an older team, and they are by 28, 29 years old, which is the average age of the 92 Dream Team. That's when you're starting to head down the other side of the hill in terms of NBA careers.
I think most of those guys, though, I know there's a few guys there that were towards the end of their career, but most of their guys still had some pretty unbelievable years in the NBA following, and but had already got a lot of championship success or final success under their belt. So I think it's just so hard to go past their experience as a group compared to this younger group representing now.
Look, Jamie, the thing that got me was not so much I guess it is the overall side, but when you're looking at the point guards and you've got Magic starting in the one, and then you go and look at the current Team USA's point guards, you've got guys like Chris Paul. How are you going to send out a guy who's 6'1" to guard someone who's 6'10" in the point? Like, as soon as Magic takes him into the post, surely that would be over. And how would you, as a coach, prepare your 6-foot guard to give up 12 inches to another point guard?
You'll have to use his 5 fouls, that's for sure. It'd be very difficult and I'm sure that the experienced heads, they'd pick on stuff like that. That they would look at the mismatches, the Karl Malone mismatch, the mismatch at centre, the mismatches that could be posed by Magic Johnson going into the post. Larry Bird going into the post, even Michael Jordan was probably even at his best later in his career working with his back to the basket initially. So they could certainly take them and play that power game. And I think that would certainly compensate against maybe some lack of perceived athleticism, although when I look at the group and look at guys like Michael Jordan and Clyde Drexler, Scottie Pippen, they're covering the perimeter pretty well. So I don't know if it's going to be that much of an issue. So I think the smarts and the power game would overcome them, that's for sure.
I think, take a listen to what Rick Buger said, because I think that sort of flows back into the thing about, those points that you've just said and how the game's changed.
Parker, okay, so you just heard that Kobe Bryant said that this year's Olympic team could beat the original 92 Dream Team. Rick, Kobe is tripping, right?
No, he is not. Take off the sepia tone glasses. Just because it was the first original Dream Team and just because they beat everybody by 50, let's look at where these guys were in their career. We're talking about an old Magic Johnson and an old Larry Bird against these very young guns. Athletically, they would have difficulty matching up with them, not only because of where they were in their careers, but because the game has changed.
Stop it, Rick Bucher, stop it, because the one thing you have not mentioned in that whole little scenario is that the Dream Team had Michael Jordan, and down the stretch of any big game, I agree. I always will bet on Michael Jordan, give him the basketball, move everybody else out of the way. Larry Bird with his bad back.
Larry Bird would be on the sideline.
I don't care. Magic Johnson, move to the side.
Larry Bird would be laying on his stomach on the sideline laughing.
And Magic would beat Kobe.
Hold on. And the Dream Team also has something that this team doesn't have, which is size. I'm going to quote the late, great Robin Harris and paraphrase him, excuse me. If Kobe Bryant and these young bucks even dream about beating the Dream Team, they better wake up and apologize. Okay?
There are also
Christian Laettner would get buckets on this team.
Stop it. No, you just went too far. I was with you right up till that. No, look, calendars have numbers too. Right? And we're talking about 2012. Not only that the birth dates of the guys that they would be playing against in 92, but the fact that the game has changed. Look at the teams that we had in the NBA Finals this year. In the last couple of years, size is not part of this game anymore. Those big men have been antiquated because the game is too fast and athletic.
You got a point.
All right, here we go.
I know I'm going to lose it.
I think... And I sort of spoke to this with you on the podcast, Matt. I think, a lot of people like the idea of Magic Johnson getting the ball and going one-on-one in the post against whatever point guard it might be that's up against him. But, you've got to look at the flip side. There's no way that Magic Johnson would be able to guard any of those young point guards, Chris Paul, Deron Williams, or Russell Westbrook, on the other end of the court.
Well, you give them a step because they're giving up, a foot in height. It's okay. I know. Yes? Okay, Emma. Emma's the cat for people who are interested. And
lost your thought, mate.
She's climbing into the TV cabinet. Yeah, no, I'm completely lost. But on whatever it was a good point, and I was bloody right about it.
Giving him a step.
Yeah, give him a step, carry a hand. You only got to stay in front of him for 2 or 3 slides because the help's going to be there. That's the way every big guarded every perimeter player ever.
I think you're right. The speed issue will be there for them in the extended court, and that'd be something for them to deal with is their defensive transition. But once they're in the half court, that length is going to help negate that a little bit. And then just to the point in regard to the game's not played that way anymore. I actually think that speaks more volumes for the defence of the 92 team because these players right now just wouldn't know how to deal with this inside game that these guys could bring.
So I don't think that the game has necessarily changed. I think that the quality of bigs no longer there. I think in the 90s we were just given like a resurgence of quality bigs with Ewing, Robinson, Olajuwon, and then Shaquille. I mean, those guys, with the exception of Ewing, got championships, and a lot of them. So for Rick Butch to be saying, the game's changed. Paul Gasol's 7 foot, and he was integral for the Lakers. Kevin Garnett's slid over to the center, and he's still playing the 5 spot. Olajuwon got championships. Shaquille was a major force right up until the last couple of years.
You've lost me, Matt. You've lost me. I find it ridiculous for you to say that the game of Kevin Garnett and Pau Gasol is comparable to guys like Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson and Patrick Ewing.
Absolutely comparable to Hakeem Olajuwon's game.
They're totally different. The reality is, you discounted athleticism earlier, and Michael Jordan has he's come out and said that, the 92 team, it wasn't athletic. Those are Michael Jordan's words. There are some players that are on that team that are really strong, like Malone, some that are really long, like Robinson, and have long arms, like Scottie Pippen, but no one really besides those guys and Jordan are really that great an athlete.
Drexler.
Now,
Barkley, Malone.
On offense, not at the stage of their career. I already said Malone. Not at that stage of their career. As for offense,
Charles Barkley carried the Phoenix Suns to Game 7 against Chicago the very next year.
I'm not doubting that, Matt, but I'm doubting his athleticism at that stage of his career. With the improvements in athleticism that players have come through with these days, coaches are able, and Jamie might be able to back me up on this, coaches are able to run different defensive schemes which has athletic players coming over for double teams without having to leave wide open shooters. So these athletic team of 2012 would no doubt be able to double team the majority of the 92 Dream Team without ever having a defensive lapse because, number one, they don't have any outside shooters. They had Chris Mullin, who was there purely for outside shooting, but besides him, there wasn't really... And Larry Bird, but like we said, he spent half of his time resting on his back. They didn't have a great amount of outside shooters, but it wouldn't matter because the 2012 team could easily cover everyone on a defensive end and get back. They could double them and get back before anyone knew they were gone. Do you see much of that happening in international basketball, Jamie?
Look, absolutely. With the US, definitely in the junior stuff, they use that to their strength. And you can see in these lead-up games with the US that they're using that athleticism. And that's the thing that seems to separate them. In the half court, it seems like there's not a big gap between them and some of the other teams. They're able to play with them, pretty well. So it's only the spurts in the game. The 3 games that I've watched so far have been when the US have really, upped the tempo with their D, up the floor, looked to double team, and really pressure the ball, and that's certainly changed things. But I just feel like that the 92 players would be just too intelligent. They just deal with that pressure quite comfortably and turn it into easy looks.
I guess one spot, we've sort of talked about the point guards, we've talked about the big men. I guess we haven't really talked about the wings. So obviously we're talking about the shooting guards, Michael Jordan and Clyde Drexler against Kobe Bryant and James Harden, as well as the small forwards where we'd have Larry Bird, Scottie Pippen and Chris Mullin against versatile players like LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony and Andre Iguadola. Your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I think obviously both teams have great wings, and that's their strengths. But I think the bigger guys on the 92 team will have to stretch out and guard those guys, like Lebron or Durrant or whatever. And they're a bit more versatile, I think, and they've got the speed and the athleticism to, if LeBron wants to go side, he can, or if other people have to guard him, then they'll have to. And I think also we talked before about how the point guards will be quicker. Then if they're able to get in the lane, and then that you've got the likes of Durant and others spotting up outside, then they're also going to be able to knock those outside shots. And that's another point that's a lot more, it happens a lot more often in the game today, that 3 points are like much bigger than they were back then.
Yeah, 3-point shooting in the modern game has become necessity. Like you said, like free throw shooting, it's no longer a skill which back in 1992 was kind of a skill that, you'd have certain specialists that you'd have on your team that would come on and shoot 3-pointers like Chris Mullin was in this team. Every single player, bar Tyson Chandler, is adept at making the 3-point shot on this 2012 team. And don't forget, this would be played, assumingly, in international rules where the 3-point line is a lot closer than what it is in the NBA competition. That changes the flow of the game significantly when only one team has one 3-point shooter on the floor and the other team has 4 3-point shooters on the floor.
I guess, are we using the 3-point line they used in 92 or the one we're using now?
Well, they're both a lot closer than the NBA 3-point line.
It's probably made life a bit easier for those apparently non-shooting players that they had in 92 because it was a little bit closer then. But it was interesting watching the USA trying to play Brazil earlier in the week, and at quarter time USA's down by 10 because they were 0 for 12 from the 3-point line. So I think the teams are still going to try and force the USA to make those threes, and it wasn't until the USA really pressured the ball up the floor and didn't allow them to string 2 or 3 passes together in the half court did things start to happen.
What's interesting to me is that we've basically reached the 30-minute mark of the podcast here, and there hasn't really been much mention of Michael Jordan. I'm sure there's been people listening, driving on their way to work or listening on their iPod, screaming out for us to bring up the fact that the 1992 team had arguably the greatest player to ever play the game. So obviously we're on the topic of the wings. How about we listen to the comments that were made by legendary coach Jack Ramsey on ESPN. For those of you who don't know, Jack Ramsey won an NBA championship coaching the Portland Trail Blazers in 1977. He was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame and is basically regarded as one of the top 10 coaches in NBA history. So this is his take on how the 2012 team would have to defend Michael Jordan.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I really agree with what he said there.
I know.
Some great points.
Well, I think the silence speaks volumes. That's how you guard Michael Jordan.
Yeah,
shut up and hope he misses.
Was that the joke, or?
How would the 2012 team defend Michael Jordan?
Well, if they wanted to do it man-to-man, you have Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, Andre Iguadola, ready to jump in and take the challenge. That's what they do. All of those players take the best offensive perimeter player that the other team has and work on them. And they're all very good. Not that they would stop Michael Jordan. No one has stopped Michael Jordan yet.
That's if they would have to do it man-to-man. You would imagine there might be a double team there, and one of the big concerns...
There would surely be double teaming, and there might even be a zone defense thrown in, where you could really focus, or a 4-man zone and one on Michael. That depends on how creative Mike Krzyzewski might be under those circumstances.
Does this guy talk slow enough, or what?
Did he really just suggest a boxing one?
Old school.
He's been discounted from the conversation for merely suggesting that in international ball, you go with a box and one. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
I did see a box and one in an under 14 game tonight.
Shane Heel slapped one on us with the Taipans once. He boxed and won Catalini. We were very confused for a while there. No one had seen it for quite a while.
Hall of Fame coach Jack Ramsey then talking, I think.
Yeah, well, they ought to give him a call and take that plaque back.
So, yeah, I guess, well, Matt, you've been fairly adamant about, the 1992 team having its way with the 2012 team. What type of a role does Michael Jordan have in that matchup?
You look at who he's going to go up against, and I guess it's Kobe, who is, let's face it, he's Jordan light. He's patterned his entire existence off Michael Jordan, and quite frankly, he's come up short. So you take the original article over the imitation every single time. I'll give Kobe the nod over Drexler. I'm happy to do that. Good for Kobe. Congratulations. So then we move to the 3 spot. Now, 3 spot's a bit tricky for the 92 team because LeBron is the only thing that's ever going to get close to Jordan in terms of just pure domination. The way he managed to step up in this year's finals, it'll be a long time till we see something like that again. And he's very scary. But after that, I think I'll take Scottie Pippen over whoever they've got coming next. So, for me, realistically, like I said earlier, the only 3 people who can even make the 92 team are Kobe, Durrant on a good day, and LeBron. The rest of them can, sit on the sidelines and wave their towels.
When it comes to Michael Jordan, obviously, he is the best player. If these 2 teams did take the court against each other, he is the best player that would be on the floor. And although those players that are on the 92 team are Hall of Famers, I think, bar Charles Barkley, the 5 best players on the court at any time in this matchup would be Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul. You could throw in Barkley there, but, just as equal to Barkley would be perhaps throwing in Kobe Bryant to that. So, I mean...
But they're not positional players. You can't run a team without a 5, and you can't run a team without a proper 3. So... But
what I'm saying is if you're saying that, Michael Jordan's the be-all and end-all to this argument, because he's the best player...
He's the be-all and end-all to the 2 spot. There's no argument in the 2 spot at all.
No, well, there's not in the 2 spot. You're right. Kobe Bryant isn't going to be able to stop Jordan by himself.
No one's going to stop Jordan. No one's going to argue that. But it's about limiting him, and I think the only person that's going to come close to that is LeBron.
Yeah, that would be an interesting matchup. But then you're moving LeBron out of position into the 2. He's creating a mismatch somewhere else.
I think that's what we were talking about before. The fact that the game has changed so much, and really. You could have Tyson Chandler in the 5 spot, and you could put any other, group of 4 players on the court. Like LeBron basically played every single position from 1 to 5 through the NBA playoffs at some stage. He played the 5 spot numerous times.
Seem to remember Magic doing that in 1980.
Yeah, definitely. But Magic, this is 12 years after Magic did it. LeBron James did it a mere 3 months ago. So, I mean, I know what you're saying about shuffling players around, but quite literally, you could run any 4 guys through the 1 to 4 positions on this team, and you would be fine.
I think they're forced to do this stuff, and because they just don't have those quality bigs, which goes back to what we were talking about before, that they're having to play guys out of position and sort of junk it up a little bit with the way they play. And it just keeps coming back to that. How do they cope with the size? And I suppose we can talk about this forever about the athleticism versus the size game. But I think if you look at most competitions, when the size is there, the size wins out. Yeah. Maybe it hasn't been there in the last year or 2 in the final game, and it's been 2 athletic teams going against each other. But I think if a side had the size with the talent that this sort of team had, that they would dominate the NBA and everyone would fall back in love with the big post and power, the true power forwards.
Well, there's one, you're right, and we are kind of debating the big man versus the speed and athleticism, but a totally different factor that will come into play in this matchup, as it does in any basketball matchup, is that of the officiating. Now, I might throw this one at you, Jamie, just because you've probably been closest to international officiating out of the four of us right now. But I mean, officiating has changed, and this is one of the main reasons why the 2012 team, I think, would have a very good chance of beating the Dream Team. Jordan was absolutely on point when he brought up the fact that the old timers were smarter and had higher IQs. You could argue that Iguadola, Westbrook, and Carmelo aren't exactly brimming with intelligence when you see, some of their NBA performances. But it doesn't really matter anymore, in my opinion, with the speed, with the fact that speed and agility can trump that skill any day. But back when there were no hand-checking rules and games were as physical, as a UFC cage fight, you had to rely on skill and smarts to get the better of your opponent. Whereas today you just need to be quicker or faster, and most calls will go your way. And also, don't forget, something which was a huge, huge part of the NBA Finals and the NBA playoffs this year is the concept of flopping, which the old-time players of 1992 would not adapt to very well unless they decided to, substitute maybe Christian Laettner for Reggie Miller.
But definitely is, changing emphasis with some of the rulings. But just sort of saying that I think there has been, obviously some changes in interpretation with some of the rules and how you're allowed to defend is a little bit different to the way it was back then. But I just feel like that the players would be able to adjust. But regardless of whether it's the 92 team or the 2012 team, that adjusting to international interpretation will be an issue for both. And I'd suggest they'd both probably find their way within the first quarter and be smart enough to deal with the way they wanted to have the game called. So I don't know if it would have a huge impact on the game. The players would be good enough to work with them.
On the in terms of the physicality, I think it would work both ways. Whereas the Dream Team, the original Dream Team, was used to getting beaten. John Stockton would throw a sucker punch in the lane, and it was a physical, hard game back then. They would arrive in the 2012 environment and have a field day. It would be like, for them, it would feel like no one was guarding them because they weren't getting hip checked and hand checked every time they tried to turn the corner. Yeah. So they would just be loving life.
Well, guys like Mike Drexler and Michael Jordan would find it even easier getting to the basket.
Yeah, without having someone attached to your hip or, Bill Lambier waiting for you in the paint, ready to really hurt you.
The old Jordan rules.
And the physicality, even in the NBL, from the years I was involved, dropped off dramatically. When the old heads like Hoagie and John Dodge and Pep and Melmoth, when everyone sort of started to drop out, the real enforcer, Vlahoff, Fisher, guys like that just disappeared completely. So the game has certainly become less physical, and I definitely believe that a big, strong physical player like Nate would do well in this current situation.
All right, I guess it's almost time to wrap it up. One of the more unusual things that came out of this was the use of AccuScore, which I don't know if many people know what it was, but they've fed the data into a computer, and based on 10,000 computer simulations. Well, I'll just I'll let you guys take a listen.
All right, we know what Kobe thinks. We know what Jordan thinks. Here's what AccuScore found when they actually had computers project a series of 10,000 games, Chris, because 5,000 wouldn't have been enough. And the way it came out was the 92 Dreamers won almost 54% of the games. The 92 crew averaged just 1 point per game more, though, in those simulations. Very interesting numbers.
Would have been good games, at least.
I'd want.
Close games, absolutely.
So...
Only got to by 1 point.
This is the point that we're coming to, and I mean, we're arguing at some stages. We're saying who would win, and we're arguing at some stages of whether they could win. And I think that this basically goes to show that when one team's winning 54% of the time, the other 46%. Odds at the TAB certainly weren't that close when Miami took on Oklahoma this year, and that was thought to be a very close matchup as well. I mean, the 92 team in that computer simulation only won by 1 point per game, and it's quite obvious that no matter which way you kind of slice this cake here, that I think we can all agree that at least either team on any given day could probably win. Mark, what do you think?
I think it's obvious, like, both teams have their advantages. And, you know, like that AccuScore thing proved that, fact is it's going to be a close game. And one point you mentioned earlier, Boyce, was that it was a good thing that everybody looked up to Kobe and he was the dominant figure of that team, whereas the 92 team had a few more egos that would want to be the man, so to speak. But I think that's, when it comes down to crunch time, I think Kobe would kill him. There's no way Kobe's going to sit back, even if he's having a bad game or LeBron's killing it or whatever. There's no way Kobe's going to miss that opportunity to, you know, take it upon himself and beat them. I think in a close game, he'd kill it for him. And the other thing is, I think the basketball IQ of the 92 team, it gives you a couple steps. I mean, we've been talking about athleticism a lot, but the fact is, a wise old guy with a great basketball IQ, you know, you can afford a couple steps if you're just a bit smarter. I think that those two things would, in my opinion, make the 92 team a little bit better.
Yeah, get on board, baby.
Well, it seems we've got a little bit of a consensus here. So yeah, I'm gonna have to pull out the last card out of the bag, and that's the fact that there's only really one person who is a part of both teams, and that's Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski. So let's take a quick listen to what he said when he was posed the question.
Head coach Mike Krzyzewski was an assistant on the 92 Dream Team and put the debate in perspective.
92, there were guys who were at the end of their careers. You know, I mean, Larry had a hard time because of John Stockton was hurt. Magic had been out a year. You know, in their prime, all those guys together, there would be no team ever like that.
So, I mean, like I said, coming back to what we...
He has to be diplomatic because he has to go and see the other mob every day.
That's right.
How are you going to go and face Kobe the next day after saying that?
Yeah, I guess obviously the consensus here is you know, that the 92 team is the better team. But I mean, I think we walk away from this podcast with the understanding that no matter who would win in a one-on-one matchup, I think if you took this series to 7 games, or you took it, you know, in the context of an Olympic tournament, there would certainly be wins taken and scalps awarded to both teams. I don't think anyone's sweeping this series. I don't think anyone's clearly dominating the series. I think it's a really close situation. And I mean, at the end of the day, when you're comparing this team to the Dream Team, saying it's going to be a very, very close battle, you've got to think that the opponents that are going to match up against this 2012 Team USA team are in for a whole lot of trouble.
If it was a best-of-7 series, I'd probably go the other way. I'd probably say the current team would win, with their legs and the old guys' bodies failing them down the stretch.
I just can't believe we're listening to a computer. You guys don't watch Matrix, the computer was wrong. Terminator, computer was wrong. Everything you've ever learned, the computer is always wrong. Dream Team, original Dream Team by 20 every night.
I just wonder, with the AccuScore, with that 54% winning for the 92, obviously Jordan's probably knocking down the winning shot a lot of times, but I wonder what percentage of it was that the 2012 team were down 1 and LeBron missed the shot.
or pass the ball off to a Udonis Haslem type player, perhaps. To Anthony Davis, maybe. All right, guys. Well, we might end it up there. It's been fantastic to have you all on board. I know there was plenty of people here. We apologise. Paul from Hoop Diary, and a number of other guys who tried to get through that couldn't. We'll try and do another one of these in the future, but until then, thank you to Matt Smith. Thank you to Jamie O. Thank you to Mark Goodwin. It's been a pleasure talking to you all, and keep hyping the Hoopla boys.
Cheers, man.
Gentlemen,
Great fun.